And a good walkthrough Wednesday, everybody. Here to Birds 365 on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. Yes, the man at the top was not lying. It's Mac and Mac. Good to get Johnny Mac back after heading down to Tampa on Monday to cover the game and then the adventures of travel in the United States coming home yesterday. But we did get Johnny Mac back, which is good to see you, brother. I asked Mark Farzetta, this was my first question to him yesterday, so I'll make it to you as well. A+ to F, Eagles 25-11 victory over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What would you grade the entire Philadelphia team on for their win to get to 3-0?
Not that great. B-, C+. But I think that tells you how good this team is. I mean, they didn't play all that well. Bunch of key players were sick, had the flu or flu-like symptoms. And you look up and they got almost 500 yards of offense. They had them under 100 until that last garbage time drive on defense. I mean, they're just freaking talented. But no, they didn't play that well. They didn't play that well at all. And they just dominated the game against a team that was 2-0. Now, Tampa's not that good at that record. You kind of saw that as well. But no, I didn't think they played well. And they completely dominated the football game. So I think that's a positive sign, to say the least.
I was going to agree wholeheartedly with you. You say, wow, they didn't play well. And they won handily. They won going away. They won going away with not much sweat involved. That's a pretty good thing. When you can honestly look in the mirror and say, you know, we didn't play close to as well as we can, and you were never really tested in the game, that's a pretty damn good sign. And you're right. We'll find out what the Bucs finished the season at. I thought they were going to be a below 500 team. I still think they're going to be a below 500 team. But they were legitimately 2-0 coming into the game. One thing that did impress me about the Eagles was you and I talking about the game leading up to it. Both of us said whatever they set the over-under number for DeAndre Swift after his 175 rushing yard performance the week before, probably want to go to the under because the Bucs are such a difficult team to run on. No, they weren't. The Eagles ran it right down their throat almost as easily as they did the Minnesota Vikings. That's the Eagle offensive line, but that's DeAndre Swift as well, John. The guy is off to a pretty phenomenal start in his Eagle career.
Yeah, he's played 2 games, really, because he barely played in the third game. And he's at exactly the season opener. He had 2 touches. So essentially he's played 2 games. And he's exactly almost to the yard halfway to his career high in rushing in 2 games. And in 2 games, his career high is 617. He's at 308 in 2 games. So, I mean, it's a marriage. It's a chicken and egg. There's some significant burst and explosion. But boy, man, you're right. He could have had an 18-wheeler next to him on some of those runs. I mean, these were just gaping holes. The one play with Landon Dickerson I kept talking about, the Eagles put it up. This is Quentin Nelson in his prime. They used to call it offensive line porn. Just devastating. A Tampa Bay defender with a kick-out block. It was the play he got injured on. He says he didn't get injured on. He was fine after the game. He talked to reporters. He said he was a little banged up before that, but it came out after that play. I thought he hurt himself because he destroyed the guy so much. I mean, and Jack Stoll was securing the other side, and it was just unbelievable. So I don't want to downplay DeAndre Swift because it's sort of like Brock Purdy, what I say in San Francisco. Now everybody says, and you're a big Brock Purdy guy. Bottom line is Brock Purdy does, yes. Is he helped by Kyle Shanahan? Of course he is. But he does better than Jimmy Garoppolo. Yeah, they won a lot of games, but he's doing better than everybody else. And that's how I look at DeAndre Swift. Yes, these are massive holes. This is the best offensive line in football. But he's doing better than everybody else, so you got to give him credit as well. But I would say, the strength of this team. And my advice, this is where what I came out of this game. My advice to every NFL general manager is to take a step back, watch how Howie Roseman built this roster, and do it and try to, try to replicate as much as possible. When you think you're good on the offensive line and you think you're good on the defensive line, take another one. Take another one. Keep taking them. You're going to be in a lot of football games if you dominate on the front on both sides. In the last two games, New England was a little bit more difficult. Maybe it was the weather. The last two games, the Eagles have completely dominated up front on both sides of the football. Taken up every team.
They are absolutely winning in the trenches. You are correct. But I still think you come up a little short of giving Kenny Gainwell his credit. DeAndre Swift his credit. Isn't Kenny Gainwell running behind that same best offensive line by a mile? That's what
I just said. I just said that with Brock Purdy. You got to give him credit. He's doing better than the other guys. But if you ask me to force, I mean, it's the offensive line more than DeAndre Swift. But
then why isn't Kenny Gainwell averaging 6 yards a carry?
Well, why is Jimmy Garoppolo not perfect as the starting quarterback in San Francisco? He wasn't perfect, but he won a lot of games, and he's not very good, but he won a lot of games. I'm just saying he's doing better than everybody else, so I give him credit for that. But I'm not going to sit here and say he's one of the best running backs in football. It's the offensive line. If you're forcing me to take a chicken or an egg, yeah, I'm taking the offensive line. These holes are massive, massive. Now, he's doing better than Kenny Gainwell and Boston Scott, and Rashad Penny can't get off the field. So you can say definitively he's better than those guys. But I'm still taking Christian McCaffrey, and I'm still taking all the great running backs in this league. I mean, he's had, like I said, in 2 games, Jody, and he had a good offensive line in Detroit. I was talking to him about it after the game. He said, I had a good offensive line in Detroit. 617. He's at 308 in 2 games.
Yeah. The numbers are just jumping off the page when it comes to DeAndre Swift. He has been, I'm giving him a little bit more credit than you have. You're right. If you have to say which is more, the back or the offensive line is the best. But he's doing things that we haven't seen an Eagle back do since Shady McCoy. This is taking it to a new level that we haven't seen in a while. And again, I understand that the game was basically over. The Eagles turned a 4-minute drive into a 9-minute drive. That might have been my most impressive moment of the entire game, was the fact that they were able to take the drive, move it down the field, take the heart and soul of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so much so that their coach didn't even bother taking timeouts. He said, why? We're not coming back from this deficit. They're not going to.
Yeah, he did give up.
It really
I had a lot of boxing references because, you have the Jalen Carter. That's the most violent punch I've seen since Mike Tyson. And then I was thinking about Sugar Ray Leonard and Roberto Duran because Todd Bowles just said no mas, no more, no more. And it was those fronts. Look, they have great players. Jalen's great. DeAndre's playing great. AJ Brown's great. Darius Slay's great. They have great players all over the field. All over the field. Bradbury's great. On both sides of the football. It's the freaking fronts, man. These guys dominate. We said Tampa Bay's good up front. Now, Minnesota's not, so you could say, all right, well, you understand it. Tampa Bay's actually good up front. Didn't matter. Did not matter. It's not going to be that perfect every week. And by the way, Kelsey was sick. You're not even playing at his optimum level. Yeah, I can't say enough about those fronts. And Jalen Carter, I can't. This league doesn't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. So many teams in this league. I picked on Chicago too much. I can't even talk about Chicago anymore.
No,
They disgust me.
they
They
are a stone
disgust
cold
me.
dumpster fire.
Who'd they take? Darnell, right? Are you freaking kidding me? You look at those two players and say, "Oh, I'm gonna take the offense." Offensive line, defensive line. But again, then there's talent differential. You're on the defensive line. So when I say pick one, pick one. So typically I'm not going to criticize you. If they would have took Peter Skoronski, I would have been somewhat fine with it. But they take a leap at that position. The Eagles are just the whole league deserves what they're getting when they get lambasted by this team because they give them a player like that. They gave a player like that on a platter to this particular team.
I would say that Mr. Carter's been pretty damn impressive for the first couple of games. Grading out is probably the best defensive tackle in all of football. 3 games into his NFL career, as good a tackle, if not the best tackle in all of football. That's pretty damn impressive. And his play downfield was something that you should remember for years. Everybody pushes the bike. Everybody beats a defensive lineman one-on-one. To come from behind after not being able to get to the quarterback because you're being double teamed. Again, 3 games into his career, and they're double teaming out on like every other play. To make that heads up play to come from behind and punch that football out was just things that career makers, not that he needs any help, just stone cold dominant this quick, this fast. And you mentioned how good the Eagles have been on the defensive line, Jack. And Hassan Reddick took a goose egg on the scoreboard on no sacks, no tackles, didn't register a play on the score sheet. And we know how good he was and prominent he was to the Eagles defense last year. Only he knows for sure what the injury is restricting him from doing, but he hasn't given him anything in the first 3 games. And they're still playing as dominantly as they are on the defensive line. That's about those 2 big dogs in the middle that are just manhandling the competition.
Yeah, I mean, well, you know me and the pressure's been there for Hassan. He's obviously having a difficult time finishing, and that's been a big strength of his. But he keeps getting hurries, he keeps getting pressures. They only had 2 sacks, but anybody who watched that game, I mean, Baker Mayfield was running for his life. The word is out on the Eagles. You better get the football out. You better get it out, and people are getting it out quick. Mac Jones, ridiculous level. Kirk Cousins was way ahead of his normal level. Baker Mayfield was just, running for his life. And you see the advantage. They have 99 yards through 3 quarters, essentially. The quarterback was scared to death. So did they finish and get sacks? No, but they accomplished what they wanted to accomplish. Now later, yes, I think, and you've already seen it. You saw it in the Minnesota game a little bit. If you can hold up a little bit, I think it's going to be difficult for them in the back end at times. I don't think they're as talented as the secondary outside of Slay and Bradbury, obviously. I think, they can be thrown on if you can somewhat limit the pass rush, but that's easier said than done. That is way easier said than done.
And you and I both are a little surprised that Mario Goodrich doesn't even get activated.
Yeah, that's
for the
a bad
game.
sign for Mario. Bad sign.
You and I had him in as the guy who's going to take the most snaps in the slot, filling in for Avonte Maddox. I was a little bit more warm to the idea of Bradbury going in there. But to the point of Mario Goodrich doesn't even dress for the game, and Bradbury takes as many snaps as he did, I guess we needed to pay closer attention to what Sean Desai was doing in the practices. They moved him in there more than just for show. They actually considered that an option and proved it by how much he played in the slot this week.
Yeah, I that's one I still don't agree with, but they're at the point in the season when you have to, multiple injuries at the position. Look, if Abonte's here, obviously Abonte's playing in the slot. if Zach McPherson's here, I think Zach McPherson's playing in the slot, to be honest. So they're down to the third. The really big surprise to me was Sidney Brown, but I kind of got alluded to that on Friday that he was going to be in the mix to play in the slot, and he would have played more, and he actually played pretty well, but he strained his hamstring. We'll see how that is this week. It's not supposed to be that severe, but with Bass guys, that's a bad sign with Goodrich that they didn't trust him, because they're doing all these things to try to find a slot cornerback. That's still going to be an issue moving forward, I think, because, hey, multiple, Doug Peterson used to say it all the time. It's not necessarily injuries. It's multiple injuries at the same position. And they're already down to the third. And when you're down to the third guy, you got to start tinkering. Back in the day when Avante was a rookie, they had to play him at safety. They didn't want to. They had to, because they had so many injuries. And that's where we are with Sidney Brown. And James Bradbury moving inside. Josh Jobe, early Tampa Bay came in with a pretty good game plan. Like, we're talking about the first 2 drives maybe. And they were looking for Josh Jobe, and they were having some success. And then the pass rush got home, and yeah, that was it. So that's what I'm kind of talking about. Pass rush is the strength of this team, which is obvious in the front, and they got to kind of carry the back end a little bit, especially until they figure things out long term, what they want to do. And maybe Josh Jobe improves. Maybe they make a trade. Maybe they do something. Maybe they bring in a veteran player. Maybe Sidney Brown clicks. But that's still a work in progress, I would say.
Let me ask you about the point you made where you said you get down to that third guy. Now you got to start to tinker, because an injury you can overcome. 2 injuries to the same position is pretty difficult. Does it bring into question the way the Eagles prepare for the season? I know at least Nick Sirianni after game 1 did say, well, maybe we need to rethink the way we handle preseason games and like. And that was mostly because the offense kind of looked out of kilter, wasn't in any kind of a flow. I don't know that that was an overall statement. I think it was more directed at the offense. Well, the reason that they handled the preseason, both of the Sirianni years, now the 3 of the Sirianni preseason years, was to keep guys healthy, to avoid injuries, to come into the season as healthy, if not more healthy than everybody else. Well, you're telling me about all these injuries the Eagles have, so far so that they have to tinker. Do you think maybe they rethink their preseason preparation? Because, well, if we're not going to be injury free or injury less than the competition, are we actually helping ourselves by not working during preseason?
No, I mean, nobody does. I always go back to the famous Tom Moore quote, my favorite. Now, that was a high profile position, but you don't practice fucked, and you're fucked when you're down to number 3. You don't practice that. Oh, you can't. I always say you can't legislate injuries. You practice, you expect to have
if
a
you can't legislate injuries, why would you have a preseason where you do less to get through the preseason?
I'm not saying the Eagles, that's my belief. I'm not saying the Eagles don't believe they can control certain things. But Howie said it numerous times in this offseason. He's not unaware that they got lucky a little bit last year when it came to injuries. He mentioned it 3 times, I think, in the offseason. We probably can't count on that again. But from a coaching standpoint, you don't say, oh, let's take so-and-so and play him out of position while you're practicing, because you're not, not assuming.
They did with Bradbury.
You're not assuming. Well, he worked in the slot a handful of times. I mean, that was more of what Sean was talking about, certain guys going inside. Like, I bring up Hawkinson and Kelsey and Mike Evans. That was about situational football. Like, if this happens, let's get him comfortable. That wasn't about, oh, we're going to have 2 injuries and James is going to play in the slot. And by the way, James played 20 something snaps in the slot, which is extraordinary amount for him. You know, you can go back years and he didn't play that much. But Sidney was out there and probably would have been out there more had he not gotten hurt as well. So they were mixing and matching depending on the competition, which, by the way, I think is a good thing. And I've said that for weeks with Sean Desai. He seems a little bit more open-minded when it comes to situational matchups.
Yep.
But the play of Bradbury in the slot in the preseason wasn't about, oh, in case of injury. It was about it was matchup driven. Kelsey's on the schedule, Hawkinson's on the schedule, blah blah blah's on the schedule. It was matchup.
It wasn't. It wasn't because they don't practice fucked. You just told me teams don't practice fucked.
Yeah,
so of course John Desai's not going to say, well, we're practicing it because there's the possibility of injury. Well, guess what? Injuries happen. And then you're damn glad that you practice it for whatever reasons, matchup or whatever else. The fact that Bradbury got some practice in the spring turns out it was a pretty damn good idea.
Well, yeah, but I it worked out, because now you have to use him there and he's more comfortable. But I'm not going to give him credit for saying, oh, I'm going to, in other words, he doesn't have, other players at other positions. He's not working situationally. Like if you lose 2, I don't know, insert positions. If you lose 2 weak side linebackers and all of a sudden, Patrick Johnson was taking pregame reps at weak side linebacker. Well, he didn't take he didn't take 1 snap at weak side linebacker in training camp because you don't practice. Now they're down and they only have a certain number of bodies. And if he's got to go in, he's got to go in. That's the training camp's a lot different than obviously the regular season because you have 90 bodies and you got a bunch of guys who can sit in at their particular position. And then you're down to 53. And then in game day, you're down to 47. So it's a whole lot different. And sometimes we've seen it over the years. Teams lose tackles and they lose their swing tackle in the same game. And all of a sudden you got a tight end playing tackle. We've seen that numerous times. That's the buyer drill that happens on game day, but that's completely different than practicing fucked, as Tom Moore would say.
But even if it's just a handful of reps, if you got some of those reps in preseason, it's a good thing. I think the Eagles don't practice enough. The CBA restricts you as how much you can, and the Eagles don't even take the maximum amount. But apparently they did a pretty good job of using the limited time that they had because they have been able to cover up for being fucked by injuries earlier in the season.
I give the Eagles all their flowers. I give the Eagles all their flowers. I tell you, they dominated. I'm not giving them credit for stuff they don't deserve credit for. They didn't foresee, maybe we're going to need to play James Bradbury in the slot multiple for significant snaps each and every week because of Avonte Maddox and Zach McPherson. They get enough flowers. They don't deserve flowers for that. It worked out, but it wasn't a plan, is all I'm trying to say.
That's fine. I'll give them credit for it because, hey, in baseball, the Phillies clinched the wild card spot last night. Batter's sitting in the batter's box. He's guessing fastball, and the pitcher comes in with a curve, and he just physically adjusts to it, hits the ball out of the park. I don't go, yeah, but he was guessing fastball. I don't give a crap what he was guessing. If he hit it out of the park, he hit it out of the park. I don't care why they had Bradbury more ready than you would think that he would be, and they needed him to be ready in the slot. I'm going to give Sean Desai credit for that. He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. Yes, I see Mike Gill in our waiting room. He is ready to rock and roll with us. Mike Gill from down the shore up next here on Birds 365.